The topic of today's lecture is forms of poetry. First we'll define what is poetry. First we'll take Wordsworth as a key point to define a poetry. He defines poetry as a spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling. Why we take Wordsworth for the example to define a poetry? Because he is the one who trendset the romantic movement in English literature. Let me see the forms of poetry. These are the forms of poetry. First we'll see ballad, dream poetry, sonnets, hymns, ode, epic, mock epic, verse epitaphs, elegy, songs, lyrical ballads, postal dramatic monologues, blank verse, free verse, verse phrases and stanza forms. Let me first look into the forms of ballad. Ballad is one of the traditional form used by our famous writers, and it is also a folk song telling a popular story dramatically and objectively. It is not a personal one, it is an impersonal one. And it sets in a quatrain form. Quatrains means in a stanza, it contains 4 lines. And we also see the variation in stress and rhymes. And it's also in a dialogue form, and there is so many supernatural elements used in this form of poetry. Let me see the demands lovers. So take an example for how it was evolved. Where have you been, my long lost lover? This 7 long years and more. I have been seeking gold for thee, my love, and riches of great store. Here we see the lover is talking to his beloved in a dialectic form, and in the final we see it ends in a tragic form. The next form is dream poetry. Dream poetry means it talks about the dream and vision of the poet. It is popular in the Middle Ages. The narrator falls asleep and dreams the vision, and he used to explain in this poem. Well-known example of this type of poetry are Chaucer's Book of Duchess and Coleridge's To Blackguard. Okay, in this type of poetry, we see a contrast between a dream and reality. The next form is sonnet. It is one of the famous form of English literature. It introduced into English literature by Surrey and Wyatt. The Italian sonnets are Petrarchan sonnet kind, and another kind is the English are the Shakespearean sonnets. Petrarchan sonnet contains 8 octave lines and 6 sestet lines, and in English or the Shakespearean sonnet, it was divided as 3 quatrains and ending couplets. In octave, the line should be A, B, A, B, B, A, C, D, E, C, D, C, or C, D, C, D, C, D. It was usually in an octave, the author asked the question. In the end of the session, he answered the question. Usually the poet used to be like the sonnet in 14 lines, and in this type, the good practitioner of this type of poetry are Milton and Wordsworth. Next we'll see about Shakespearean sonnet. In this I already told you it contains 3 quatrains and ending couplets. And in this sonnet there is no volta between the stanzas. Okay, it was arranged as a quatrain. The next form is ode. Ode is an elaborated form of lyric poems. A long ceremonious address to a person or a thing or an abstract idea. In this type of form of poetry, we see a subject and a language and the tone are very serious. And it was divided as Pindaric ode or the Horatian ode. Pindaric ode is introduced by Pindaric and the Horatian ode is introduced by Horace. Pindaric ode is it was divided into 3 part structures. It is as strophe, anti-strophe and echoes. And perfect ode, the example for this Pindaric ode is Thomas Gray's The Progress of Poetry and William Collins' Ode to Evening. In Horatian ode, we take the example of ode on a Grecian urn, which was written by Keats. Okay. Next is epic. What is meant by epic? It is a long narrative, the great deeds of the legendary hero in a grand style. In Tamil literature, we'll take the example as Ramayana and Mahabharata. Here, the superhuman adventurers in battles are the voyages, and savings or establishing the nations. There are 2 types of epics. One is primary and the secondary. Primary means it is in the oral form, and in secondary means it was in the written form. For primary epics, it is an example taken as Beowulf, and the secondary one will take the examples of Paradise Lost by Milton. Next we have the mock epic. It is is also like the same as the epic, but here they are mocking the epic. That means it is having some satirical nature. Okay, the best example we have taken for this mock epic is Dryden's Falkland. An imitation of an epic is for the satirical purpose and applications of the lofty styles and convictions to trials or the pity subjects. In epics, in epics mostly we'll see so many of books, or it may be divided as cantos, and we'll see so many battles, supernatural elements is used, and epics, English, everything is used in this types of this form of poetry, and we also see the epitaph is used in this one. This form is later divided as mock heroic poem. That is also the variation we'll see between the mock epic and the mock heroic poem. Not long enough, but it's divided into books and cantos. The best example for this is Dryden's Mad Falcon, which was published in 1682. Next one is verse epitaphs. Verse means poetry. Epitaphs means letters. It is in the poetry, is in the form of letter, is called as verse epitaphs. A letter in the form of poetry we write these letters to our friends or to our patron, but it mostly in a dialectal form, that is conversational style. Its main purpose is to tell the moral, philosophical and literary themes. For this type of poetry, we take the classical models of Horace's epitaphs and Ovid's epitaphs. This was famous during the 18th century, and we'll take the example for this is Pope's and Epistles to Dr. Arbuthnot, which was published in 1734, and W.H. Auden's New Year Letter, which was published in 1940. The next form is elegy. Elegy means it's a formal lyrical poem in allegoric matter, but it includes various subjects like love, war, politics, lamentation for the dead. Elegies means mainly for the mourning purpose. If any of our friends or maybe our relatives or maybe some other health, if we write a poem, means that is called as an elegy. Conform to the mournful song for a friend or a public figure after the Renaissance. This was taken after the Renaissance only. This was established a lot, and it was concerned with the questions of living in the meaningless world. In this poem we'll see there is meaningless of life, and loneliness also we'll see, and the solitudes that poets used to express. The best example for this type of poetry is Gray's Elegy, written in a country churchyard, which was published in 1751. The next form is pastoral elegy. Pastoral elegy means it's having a rural background. The elegy which has a rural background means we call it as a pastoral elegy, and it is also having the same melancholic and reflective poems. A lamentation for the dead. That is the main theme of this type of poetry, and it also has the convictions of shepherds. And we see this type of poetry was written in a very simple language, and it's elaborate as about the rural life and nature. The best examples of this pastoral elegy are Spenser's Astrophel, which he wrote for his friend Sir Philip Sidney. Next one is Milton's Lycidas, which he dedicated to his friend Edward King. Shelley's Adonis is written for his memorable of his friend John Keats. Tennyson's In Memoriam, he writes this poem for his friend A.H. Halman, where Tennyson takes a long gap to write a literature because he mourned a lot for his friend. He can't able to accept his friend's death. Arnold's Tyrese, he wrote this one for his friend A.H. Clarke. The next form is songs. In poetry, there is a form of song also we can see. So many writers use this type of songs in their works. Either in this drama also we can see some songs. The first form of songs are Solomon's, and here they used to do. This song was introduced by Wyatt and Surrey, and some of the famous writers like Shakespeare, Ben Jonson use these songs in their dramas. And Duns also used these songs, and Blake's songs of innocence and songs of experience are very famous. We'll see. Then at the last we'll see Bob Dylan's songs. Why I am mentioning Bob Dylan? Because he is one of the Nobel Prize winner. He used to write only songs, but he won the Nobel Prize for his song. This is an important form of poetry. Next we have the lyrical ballad. Why we call it as a lyrical ballad? Because it is a combination of lyric as well as the ballad. Lyric means it is a personal one. Ballad means it is an impersonal one. There is a combination between the personal and impersonal. Then we call it as a lyrical ballad. In a lyrical ballad, a story was told emotionally by the speaker in a simple conversational style. And the words we have sevens. In Tintin Abbey, he used to write this form. And I will take an example of this stanza. Let me read this one and see. Sisters and brothers, little maid, how many may you be? How many? 7 in all, she said. And wondering looked at me. See how simple the lines are. So we call it as a lyrical ballad because it is in a simple language which expresses our personal emotion as well as it as a keynote of impersonal issues. Next, we have the dramatic monologue. Why we call it as a dramatic monologue? Here we have the combination of drama as well as the monologue. Monologue, mono means it's a meaning of single. It's one narrator who is narrating the story. But it is not a soliloquy. One person is speaking means we used to call in literature as a soliloquy. But this one is not considered as a soliloquy. Why? Because it is the narrator thinks that the audience are present in front of him and he used to narrate these stories. A single character speaks but not a soliloquy. It is not about the poet's own thoughts or the feelings. And it begins at a critical moment in the speaker's life. For example, if you take Tennyson's Ulysses and Browning's My Last Duchess, we may have who introduced this to English literature because both of these poems are published in the same year. We'll see that. So many critics are telling that Tennyson is the one who wrote the dramatic monologue in the first, and some of them are telling Browning is the first one who published this type of poetry in English literature. Next, we'll see stanzas room. At the end, we'll see what is meant by the stanzas. In English literature, we are having different types of stanzas. For example, if you take, if the